Every child has a fairy born just for them. Tinker's bell was born for you.
It's just a bell.
She's in a hurry to grow up. He dreams of exploring new lands.
Who are these dirty vagabonds, and what have they done with my children?
This is the untold story of a brother and sister, two kindred adventurers.
Wait for me!
Our Alice and our Peter.
I am Pan, god of the woodlands, and these are my woods.
Told you to pay your debt.
We've seen the boss.
How is he?
He's still the boss, isn't he?
The Lost Boys at your service.
The girl's fingernails are black with dirt. We will make a lady of you yet. Alice comes with me.
Rose,
You shall pay your debt.
I need more time.
Take me away from here.
Peter, don't let life drag you down. You just keep floating above it.
The trouble Father's in. I want to help.
Games and games, and what are your names?
Alice, look.
We can all use a little extra courage now and then.
It's not time to grow up, Alice. Never is. Peter, you'll see.
Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. And today for AAFCA Roundtables, we are talking to a longtime friend of the organization, David Oyelowo, who is starring in the upcoming film, Come Away. We're gonna start this, David, by introducing the members who are taking part, starting with a new member, Brandon Avery, who is signing in from Dallas, Texas.
Hello.
Brandon Collins, who is coming in from New York. Katia Woods, who runs AAFCA Roundtables out there in Philadelphia. Mercendez Springer in Atlanta. Carla Renata in Los Angeles. Jonita Davis in Michigan City, Indiana. You know what, and Seven, I don't know what market you're in.
Oh,
And then I
Went
can't
on
hear you.
mute.
Where are you?
Chicago.
Okay, in Chicago.
Yes.
And thank you for joining us, because I believe this is your first or second time with us, right?
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And of course, AAFCA Roundtable regular Rebecca Ford, also in Chicago. I'm going to kick it off to you guys, and I will see you on the other side.
Good afternoon, sir. I've been a huge fan of yours since Red Tails, and I was curious if you could speak a little bit about your process in choosing your projects and what specifically drew you to Come Away.
Well, you know, it's not rocket science in terms of how I choose projects. If the writing is great, if some of the people already involved are people I admire, those tend to be real things that I look for. But you know, one of the other things that has become increasingly important to me, it always has been, but it's becoming more and more forefront, is the representation of Black people on film, especially if, for me personally, I believe it is tied to negative stereotypes, caricature. You know, is it moving the conversation forward or backward? These are things I look for now, because I've been part of films, thankfully for me, that have moved the conversation forward, not just educationally, but culturally. You know, how we see ourselves reflected back to ourselves, wrongly or rightly, has an effect of how we think of ourselves, and even more importantly, how others think about us as well. Sometimes the only intersection people have with Black people is through media and movies. And so it's very important to me that that is something that I believe is edifying to culture as well.
Thank you.
Hi, David. Katia Woods here out of Philadelphia, Couple Soul Show.
Hi.
One of the things I wanted to ask you is we're seeing a lot better representation when it comes to fairy tales, you know, and understanding that in a make-believe world, anybody can play anybody. What drew you to wanting to combine? Because this is like a little bit of a mixture of Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan. And what made you say, hey, I want to tell this tale from this point of view with these type of actors?
It's a great thing that it's happening more and more. And I think for me personally, it's something I didn't realize just how much I lacked it when I was younger, than now that I'm seeing my kids, it almost becoming normal for them. And how beautiful that is to see and how different that is to my own experience. You know, when I got sent the script for Come Away, in all honesty, I was pleasantly surprised that Brenda Chapman, who directed the film, approached me. This is certainly not the kind of film that I would normally be approached with unless I was the initiator of the idea and had spent 5 to 10 years trying to get it made with a lot of rejection and failure in my wake. And so it really highlighted to me that maybe there's this shift going on, but also the fact that she was looking to cast me obviously meant that Alice and Peter were going to be Black kids. They were going to be the kind of representation that I would have loved to have seen when I was 12 years old, and certainly are for my own kids, and not just for Black and brown kids. I do truly believe that one of the ways to break down prejudice, even with white kids all over the world, is for them to see themselves reflected in people who don't look like them. Because so much of the division that is going on, certainly in this country at the moment, I think is because we are being pushed into corners and people have the perception that you are different to me, you believe things different than me, you behave differently to me, and so therefore you are not someone I can relate to. But films have a beautiful way of breaking down some of those notions. I saw it so starkly in a film I did called Queen of Cartway, which, you know, featured an 11-year-old Ugandan girl from a slum in Uganda who just happened to be a chess prodigy. And it's so amazing for me to be here in America or anywhere in the world and see little white girls, little Black girls, little brown girls and boys saying, oh my goodness, I love chess as well, or I now love chess because of that movie. And that's because they identified with a girl who they may never meet in an environment they may never visit. And that is really, really important.
Thank you so much.
Hi, David. Mercedes here out of Atlanta.
Hi.
It was a beautiful film. It really made me reflect on my own childhood of jumping in hot lava or climbing under grandma's table as I'm going through the forest, so to speak. Is there a memory that you could share from your childhood imaginative mind that that sparks your mind right now? And then also, why do you think we lose that as adults?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I remember being just obsessed with the Incredible Hulk when I was a kid, and there was nothing you could tell me that I wasn't Incredible Hulk. I was the Incredible Hulk, to the point whereby I had this day where the Incredible Hulk was on the TV. We had one of those huge televisions that was on a spindly stand, you know, the ones with the wooden paneling around it. And I got so excited about being the Incredible Hulk that I wrestled the television, and it toppled and fell directly on top of me. And my mom came running in. She had to lift the TV off me. And my mom was the kind of person who, you know, you do something like that, it's not hugs. You're like, why did you do that? I got the spanking of my life for wrestling the TV. But, you know, but that was me as a kid. I think I was about 6 or 7. And I was just completely in my imagination. with it. And that's what I love about this film, is that it acknowledges children's imagination and their desire to live in that space, but it also exhibits how that can be a tool for kids when they're going through difficult things. And it doesn't shy away from the fact that you are seeing a family going through difficult things. And I think that we traditionally in these kind of movies, even though we call them family films, they're really films that we are, dare I say it, maybe patronizing children by pretending that everything is cupcakes and fairies. Whereas, as we are living right now, that is not the case. Sometimes they can tell that their parents are going through really tough things and they don't quite know how to navigate it. And sometimes it is by playing with their dolls and creating these imaginary worlds. And sometimes, as you say, that is something we lose as well, is the ability to not be so focused on the reality of what is happening that we sometimes forget joy and play and the fact that there are things we can control and there are things that we can't. The thing we can control is our disposition in these given circumstances. So the film tries to walk the line between fantasy and reality, hopefully without patronizing kids, but also being somehow able to speak to grownups as well.
Thank you so much.
Hey, David, I'm Brandon Avery with Just My Opinion Reviews.
Hi.
Yeah, your whole film career is exceptional. You've been doing such a great job for such a long time. But with this particular film right here, Peter and Alice, two characters that are beloved by everyone for such a quite long time. And then you mentioned Brenda, the director that has been part of some of your most favorite family films of all time, your wife being attached to the Tim Burton Alice in Wonderland film, and Hook being your favorite as well. And then also representation and you having, children of your own that can relate to this, you can share that experience with. Going into this film, were you like really excited and couldn't wait to get started, or were you kind of nervous just saying like, okay, I have so many sentimental and literal connections to this film, I have to knock it out of the park, and I'm kind of nervous? And I'm like, can you talk a little bit about that?
It's always nerve-wracking, especially, and I'll be totally honest with you, especially as a Black man in movies, because we are still at a time in history whereby if it doesn't work, wrongly or rightly, you feel like, I've got to squeeze the door open, and I've got to try as much as possible to hold it open for as many people to get through so that we keep this narrative going. Traditionally, what we have had is if it doesn't work, it becomes an excuse to not do it again. And the truth of the matter is, if I were the white equivalent of me, I don't even have to think about that. I can try and fail and fail and try and succeed and fail, and the door is just perpetually open. And so I take that responsibility very seriously. So Brandon, in answer to your question, it is nerve-wracking, especially when you are groundbreaking, when you are pioneering something, when you are aware that you're standing on the shoulders of others who tried and maybe didn't get to the place that you're trying to get to, and you're trying to move it forward a little bit more so that the people who come after get to stand on your shoulders and keep moving. And I'll be honest, I would love a world in which my kids don't have to think about that, especially when it comes to an artistic endeavor that is subjective. Not everyone is gonna like any and every film. I'll watch a film with my kids and my wife. Some of us like it, some of us hate it, and that's okay. That's part of the fun. But for us, the margins of error are so slim. And especially when something like Come Away comes along, that's why I came on as a producer. I was very clear to them about, my passion for it, my desire to see this come to fruition in a great way. But you put yourself on the line. But I also believe that that's the only way to get it done, is to put yourself on the line, to feel the fear and do it anyway.
Right on. Well, you're doing a great job, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, David.
Hi, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again. So, I talked to you during The Waterman, and you seem to be drawn to these stories that have like this fantastical, childlike type of theme lately. Not all the time, but lately.
Yeah.
And so I'm just interested to know, was there a moment in your childhood that your parents did something or said something that shaped and fostered your creativity, leading you into the world of film entertainment? And are you doing that for your children?
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually not something that they said. It was something they did. You know, when I was 6, even though I was born in the UK, we moved back to Nigeria, and I lived in Nigeria from the age of 6 to 13. So I had the privilege of living in a country, a community, and in a society where I was not the minority. I was part of the majority. I was normal. I was king and pauper, you know, I was, and everything in between. I wasn't sort of sectioned off as a minority, as someone who in some way was being affected by the color of my skin every single day. And that really stuck with me when I then moved back to the UK. And now, having lived in America for 13 years, I've held on to the fact that it should be normal for me to feel like I am normal and not marginalized. You know, that's not the reality, but it should be. And I felt what that feels like because of living in Nigeria for a time. And so these projects I'm drawn to, I even though I loved Amblin movies, or I loved Goonies, Stand By Me, Neverending Story, E.T., Close Encounters, all these great films that we grew up loving, I never really saw myself represented in them. And, you know, I don't cast aspersions on those people who made those films. They were doing what they know. But now that I'm being given a platform, all I'm asking is the opportunity to exercise my own bias, which is to see myself reflected in a way that I would have loved to have seen when I was younger. And so that choice my parents made of taking us back to Nigeria has absolutely affected how I approach storytelling. And, you know, whether it's Come Away or The Waterman, these are films I'm effectively making for my 12-year-old self. I know that if I had seen those as a kid, it would have slightly reshaped how I saw the world. You know, I often tell this story about my son, who, when he was 12, and I told him that I was going to be in a Disney movie called Queen of Cartway, his first reaction was to ask me if I was going to be playing the best friend in the film. And that just shocked me, because that was clearly something to do with how he perceived a Black person in a Disney movie, the nature of the role they get to play. And so I have determined that I am going to do everything I can that that is no longer a notion he has, and certainly not the notion that his children are going to have.
I appreciate you for that. Thank you so very much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, Carla.
Hi, David. I'm Jonita Davis from The Black Cape. I love the whimsy of the movie, and how the children were just, you know, just had this, I don't know, like you said, Goonies, and had these adventures and things like that. I was wanting to know what, I mean, I could see some of that in there, and I was wondering, what was your favorite, like, adventure stories when you were little? What did you like, the Peter Pan, and all those, or was there another story that kind of got little David going?
Yes, I did love, I just had an image of little David. I did love Peter Pan. I did love Alice in Wonderland, but I also, you know, loved the Nigerian fairy tales I got told when I was back in West Africa. That were also fantastical. And, you know, Nigeria has a really deep-seated tradition of storytelling. And you know, one of the wonderful things about living in Nigeria is I had these adventures there. You know, I would run around barefoot. You know, it was a very creative childhood. We didn't have much, and so, you know, an abandoned tire became this incredible toy, and we would make footballs out of plastic bags, and we would make toys out of broken bikes and things like this. And that was a huge part of my childhood. And I see that in my kids. You know, my wife and I are fighting a never-ending battle against the amount of time they spend on these devices, because, you know, one of the things that gets eroded is your inventiveness when it comes to play. And even though they hate me when I do it, you know, I have these periods when I say to my kids, okay, give me all the devices and I want you to get bored. And then, why would you do that? Because just wait and see what happens once you get bored. And, you know, recently we did it in the lockdown. My kids were just on their devices the whole time. And my wife and I were like, enough. And we took them away. My daughter is now making these figures out of clay that she bakes in the oven, and she's now become this like amazing sculptor at the age of 8. My 15-year-old son, when we took away the devices, he now plays the piano, having never learned to play the piano. And my wife is a musician, and she's looking at him going, he's a jazz pianist. I mean, like, he literally is creating, he's doing things that he doesn't even realize he's doing. And so we're seeing the joy of them getting bored enough that they have to be imaginative. And that's what I had growing up. It's one of the things that I think is getting eroded from our kids with all of these distractions right now. And so, again, to showcase kids who have that whimsy, and for hopefully it to look like them, is something I'm just very excited about.
Okay, I'm going to tell my son that Peter Pan's dad said, "Get bored," and
do it.
My name is Okima Seven Gunn, and actually Okima is Igbo.
Oh wow! I thought so when I heard that's the tribe my mom was from.
Yes. So, everything that you were saying with Nigeria really makes sense to me. With the Chicago Defender, also Seven Gun Media. So, I have actually two things. So the first thing was when you were playing the father in Come Away. My brother, when we were growing up, he had pirates on his, in his room, and the little bottles with the ships inside.
Oh wow!
So.
Wow.
So that was when you were crafting all those things in the movie, it kind of took me back to my childhood, because his whole room was decorated with ships and pirates and things like that. So that really took me back to my childhood. And so the question that I wanted to ask you was, what did you learn on the set from Come Away? I know that every film that you've made is different and has its own personality and its own kind of, a film kind of takes on its own personality as it evolves. And, I want to thank you for taking the task and being the producer on this film, because, it deals with fantasy and identity, and there's so many issues that it deals with. So I wanted to know, what did you learn as an adult self? And then what did you learn as your childhood self?
Thank you for that. The thing I also want to just reference with what you said is that, you're talking about your childhood and your brother and these boats he had in his bottles. For us as Black people, you very rarely see that on film. You very rarely see that we also have these quirky, hobbies, and we can be geeky, and we can be, so much of what we get to see of us on film is through the haze or gaze of struggle and racial strife and inner city turmoil, and we have so much whimsy about us. There's so much, that we do that is, it just blesses my heart that you saw your brother in this film, because for some people, and we've had a bit of this, with some opposition we've faced from, to be perfectly frank, racist people who deem the film an erasure of their whiteness, where you kind of go, what are you talking about? This is a fictional fantasy fairy tale, not rooted in race or history, and any and every kid can relate to this, but somehow, our Blackness has not been allowed to be part of this whimsy in this way. So that blesses my heart to hear you even say that. And what I learned doing it actually was, Kira and Reese and Jordan, who play my kids, mine and Angelina Jolie's kids in the film, the reason we hired them for this role is that they innately had this sense of fun and play and imagination. The way you see them on film is pretty much what they were like whenever the camera stopped rolling as well. There was just this fun about them. And I think when you make enough movies, you lose a little bit of the joy. You take it a little bit for granted. You lose some of that spark of, my goodness, for a living, I get to be a guy who crafts ships and runs in the woods with his kids, and it becomes a bit technical. I'm the producer, so how are we doing with the budget? How are we doing with the this, that, and the other? And them being on the set really reminded me of just how blessed I am to get to do this for a living, how wonderful it is to retain and hold on to your sense of joy and fun and play and laughter, and how that joy can translate onto film. There's no getting away from the fact that we tried to do something quite specific with this film. We wanted to show joy, but we also didn't want to shy away from pain. And we made this film before the pandemic. Before a time where pretty much every family on the planet, certainly in America, has now had to, we can't hide our kids from this stuff. It's on the news, it's their auntie, it's their grandma, it's their friend's parent, it's so we've all been affected by this pandemic, let alone the socioeconomic effects of it. There are so many things that we are dealing with right now. I remember talking to you, Carla, in relation to the Waterman, and I recently lost my dad to cancer. I know that you said that you were dealing with that in your life, and sometimes we tell these narratives in a way where we try to hide it from the kids. But my dad died last month, and he lived with us for 4 years of colon cancer. And my kids, as well as me, have had to try and heal and find our way through that. And some of it has been joy, some of it has been laughter, some of it has been tears and hugging each other and not taking for granted that which we have. And I think that, I want to make films that equip families to have a conversation. They're not always going to be perfect. They're not always going to be deemed the best film ever made. But I do know that, for instance, when I saw E.T. for the first time, it was the first time I saw a single parent family on film. And I was like, because I had been blessed with parents who were together, and wow, even though there's this whole alien element to it, the dad had gone, the mom was trying to figure it all out, and then the kids escaped into their imagination with this extraterrestrial being. But I was like, wow, where's the dad gone? Why did he leave? And and it engendered a conversation. And so I want to make films that have both magic and meaning, and those kids really reminded me of the magic when I got to act opposite them.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Ford. I'm based in Chicago. I'm with the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin and with WCPT, which is the progressive talk radio station here. And in watching the film, I was just really interested in finding out from you what your conversations were like among the director and the other producers about race and how to present race issues, because it's not really color blind casting. I mean, somebody thought that children in interracial families aren't all the same color, and yet it's a fantasy movie and that you have participation of Blacks and Black families in the Victorian era. So tell us more about what was happening behind the scenes in your discussions about race and how race would be presented.
Yeah, no, great question. The film was written not for a Black family. You know, it was, I think it was conceived, and the idea was that it would be a white family. But when I was cast, obviously that shifted, and we actually changed very little because you know, having lived in the UK, one of the insidious things when it comes to race and racism in the UK is that one of the excuses for racism in the UK is class. Oh, no, 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 no. It's not because of your race. It's, you know, it's just, unfortunately, we are in this society where you're working class, middle class, upper class. But the thing that that denies is that by virtue of being a person of color, you are instantaneously deemed a lower class. And you cannot buy your way out of that. No matter how rich you become in British society, you will never be deemed upper class by virtue of the fact that you are Black or brown. And that is an unspoken rule that is part of just British society. And so when Angelina Jolie's sister, as played by Anna Chancellor in the film, says, you know, that is a habit of the lower class in terms of Alice biting her fingernails, that is a very loaded comment, you know, and anyone who has lived in the UK would know exactly what she is referring to there in relation to deeming me or my children lower class. And Brenda, who's American, wondered whether we should accentuate some of the racial themes in it, which if you were setting this in America, maybe, because it would be more overt. It's actually one of the things I like about living in America is that, you know, when racism is coming my way, I can pretty much see it head on. You know, whereas in the UK, it is shrouded in all this politeness or stiff upper lipness or class. And so it's not till after the fact you go, I think that was racist, you know, whereas here, you know, someone calls you the N-word, you go, oh, okay, I see where you're coming from. So, you know, that was something that we wanted to make sure remained authentic. So for instance, when you see Alice being taken to the tea room for cakes with her aunt, there are no Black people in that environment. It is and that is a place where she's trying to indoctrinate her into being more white, into being of a class that is above her class by virtue of the color of her skin. So, you know, it was something we definitely talked about, but actually one of the things we had to do is to be true to the culture. Because even though an interracial family was absolutely something that would happen in the 19th century in the UK, it was still steeped in race, but the purveying excuse was class.
Wait, an interracial family is absolutely something that would happen in the 19th century in the UK?
Oh, absolutely. It happened, but we never see it on film. You know, I'm not saying it was pervasive. I'm not saying it happened everywhere, but there's a reason this family lives outside of London in this idyllic setting. And you have Angelina's character, she has the money to be able to have her family be out in that setting. And that's one of the problems, is that our families has hit hard times, and now we're reliant on this sister who doesn't like the fact that she married a Black man. And so yes, I could send you photographs of couples who had those kind of families back then.
Well, so I mean, this is, I'll just treat this as an extension of the first question. And I remember Michael Caine talking about being in Shaka Zulu and saying it was important that it was an American director, because if there had been a British director, he could have been a red communist, but he never would have cast him as like an upper class person, no matter what his political beliefs were. But have you had a chance to screen the movie? Well, and then there's COVID, right? But what I'm trying to get at is, does the movie resonate differently among Americans and American audiences and British audiences in the UK?
Inevitably. I think that's the case with any film, in all honesty, because of the cultural nuances and differences that we all know and share. But this is part of my point, is that you very rarely see it in film. And so these racists who are trolling us at the moment would say that wouldn't happen. But if they did their research, if they did their history, they would know. For instance, I played a Unionist soldier in Lincoln, and I confront Daniel Day-Lewis as Abraham Lincoln in that film. And I had people talk to me and write to me and say, that part of the film wasn't authentic. And I say, what do you mean? Say, well, you were playing a well-spoken Black man who would never think to talk to the president in that way because he would be a slave or the son of slaves. And I would say, you do know there were Black people who were never slaves. They were literally free the whole time and educated and not slaves. And there was, no, he would be a slave. And so he would not talk to the president like that. And so you go, wow, you know, this is the power of film, that people think, you know, in that way. I did a film called A United Kingdom about Seretse Khama, who was the heir apparent to the throne of Botswana, and there were people who were just like, well, not sure that was authentic. I would literally have, you know, I would like, here's all my research. I know more about this than you. Trust and believe. This is what happened. And this was an educated man who took on the British establishment, went back to his country and became the first president of his nation. And now Botswana is one of the most thriving economies because he managed to get one over of the British government by not selling their diamonds to the British government, because they were never a colonial, they were never colonized, they were only a protectorate. So they had the access to their own resources. So these are all things that because history is written by the victors, history are written by those who, sorry to go off on a tangent on this, but another example, when we screened Selma in Selma, Alabama, there was a white lady at the back of this venue where we screened it, about 30-something-year-old lady. And she said, thank you so much for this movie. I said, oh, thank you. Why? She said, I have lived in Selma, Alabama my whole life, and I did not know that took place here. Selma, Alabama is tiny. It's so tiny. The bridge was literally about half a mile from the hall we were showing them the film. And because of education, because of all sorts of reasons, they didn't know. I talked to kids when we did that film, who I would say, do you know what, to them, MLK Day, they didn't even know what the acronym MLK meant. They just knew it was a holiday. And I'm not exaggerating. And all they knew of Dr. King was, I have a dream, not the speech, just that phrase. So there are so many things that we don't know about ourselves, or people don't know about us, because that history has been whitewashed, or it has been suppressed, or it has just never been seen. And a family the likes of which you see in Come Away was absolutely authentic to what could and did happen at that time, but we almost never see it.
Thanks so much, David, for your time. And thank you, members, for taking part and participating today. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black film critics, we thank you for joining us for another episode of AAFCA Roundtables. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.